So you have probably been asked by your math teacher to memorize the unit circle. So today I'm going to give you a quick and easy way to do that. So the unit circle, the numbers go this way counterclockwise. So we'll start with the angles and then we'll fill out the radians and the points. So first is 0 degrees. 0 degrees starts here. Then you go to 30 degrees, 45 degrees, 60 degrees, and 90 degrees. Now, how do you memorize this? So as you can see, there's this big triangle, and in between this big triangle, you add 30 degrees. So you would plus 30 to this next big triangle. Then you add 15 degrees between these two small triangles. Then you add 15 again, and then as you see, there's a big triangle right here. So you would add 30 degrees. And now it's kind of just repetitive at that point. So there's a big triangle again, so you would add 30 degrees to get 120. Now you move to a small triangle, get 135. Then you add 15 again to get 150. And now big triangle again, you would add 30 to get 180. And then at this point, it's just repetitive, like I said, so I'll just fill out the rest, and then we'll move on to radians. So now on to radians. So radians are the, radian form of degrees. So I will be showing you how to memorize these radians, and also in case you forget, I'll show you a way to actually convert degrees to radians. So 0 degrees is 0 radians. 30 degrees is pi over 6 radians. 45 degrees is pi over 4 radians. And 60 degrees is pi over 3. 90 degrees is pi over 2. So how I just remember this is that the denominator goes 3, 4, 6 this way. And it's the same after, I'll show you when I fill this out, but the denominator goes 3, 4, 6 downward. And so that's just how I remember it. And how to convert degrees to radians if you just forget what the degree form is or the radian form is. So I'll just use this as an example, 30 and pi over 6. So you would multiply 30 by pi over 180 to get the radians. So this would equal 30 pi over 180, and then you would just cross that out, so you'd get 3 pi over 18, and then simplify that again, and it's pi over 6, and that matches the radian form. And so just say you remember the degree form, or you remember the radian form, but you need the degrees, you would just do the opposite. So pi over 6 times 180 over pi. It's just flipped. So we get 180 pi over 6 pi, and so then the pi's would cancel out, and that eventually would just simplify to 30. So that is how you can find them if you just forget. So now moving on to the next quadrant. So this is 2 pi over 3. This is 3 pi over 4. 5 pi over 6. And pi. So now, how do you remember these numerators? So all the ones in the first quadrant were just pi, but now you have numbers. So as I said earlier, the denominator goes 3, 4, 6 this way. And you just subtract 1 in this quadrant. So you do 3 minus 1 is 2, so you got 2 pi. 4 minus 1 is 3, 3 pi. 6 minus 1 is 5, 5 pi. And then 180, you just have to memorize that's pi. But again, you could do the 180 times pi over 180, and then you would get 180 pi over 180, and then that cancels out, and you're left with pi. So that is how you would do that. So now to the third quadrant. So you have 7 pi over 6, 5 pi over 4, 4 pi over 3, and 3 pi over 2. So as I said earlier, it goes 3, 4, 6. The denominator goes 3, 4, 6 that way, but the denominator goes 3, 4, 6 this way in these bottom quadrants. So that is just something to remember. But now instead of subtracting 1, and these you're going to add 1 to the denominator to get whatever the numerator is. So 6 plus 1, 7. 4 plus 1 is 5. 3 plus 1 is 4. And then 2 plus 3. 2 plus 1 is 3. So that is how you get the numerators for those. And now to the last quadrant. 5 pi over 3. 7 pi over 4. 11 pi over 6. And 2 pi. So now, this one, you really kind of just have to remember. There's ways you can remember it. Someone told me before they do 5 days a week, I go to 7-Eleven to remember the numerator. But then I just kind of remember 7-Eleven, like the store. And then just 5. I just have to remember 5. So yeah, so now I'm going to fill out these things, the positive and negative, and then I'll fill out the plots. So you can think of the unit circle as like a graph. So like this is basically like a coordinate graph. So like in a coordinate graph, both x and y would be positive in this. Then here, x and y would be, well, y would be positive, but x would be negative because it's on the negative side. And then here, both x and y would be negative. And then here, x would be positive, y would be negative. So that's what we're just going to fill out. And then that will help you to know which numbers are positive and which numbers are negative on the graph. So here, both x and y are positive. Here, y is positive, x is negative. And then here, both x and y are negative. And here, x is positive, y is negative. And as you can see, it's literally just the same thing as a graph. So now I'll fill out the points, and then I'll give you ways to memorize it. So first is 1, 0. So as you can see, this lines up with the x-axis. And so like as you know, an x-intercept is when y is 0. So as you can see, y is 0 on here. So that is a way to memorize that. So now I'm going to fill out these. Square root of 3 over 2, 1/2. So, as you can see, I accidentally erased that. As you can see, 30 degrees has the points square root of 3 over 2 and 1/2, and so does 60 degrees. So you just have to know that 30 degrees will always have square root of 3 over 2 in the x, and then 1/2 in the y, and then 60 is just the opposite. And how you can remember that is 30 goes with the 3, square root of 3 over 2. And all the pi over 4s in each of the quadrants, as you will see in a second, they all have square root of 2 over 2 as their points. Some will be negative, some will be positive, but they all have square root of 2 over 2. And as I said earlier, over here, this point lined up with the x-axis, but this point lines up with the y-axis. And when you know a y-intercept has x as 0 and y as a number, so that's why it's 0, 1, because x is 0 and a y-intercept. So now I'm going to fill out the next quadrant. So as you can see, all the x's are negative in this, and that makes sense because in a graph, in the second quadrant, all the x's are negative. And as you can see, 5 pi over 6 has negative square root of 3 over 2 as the x, and then pi over 3 has 1/2 as the x, and then pi over 4 has square root of 2 over 2 as its coordinates, but just x is negative. And then same with here, -1 comma 0, because it's in the second quadrant, so it's negative. So now on to the third quadrant. So all of x and y are both negative now, but it's the same points, just some are positive, some are negative. Pi over 3 has 1/2 as its x coordinate, and pi over 6 has negative square root 3 over 2 as its x. And so now I'll just do the last little quadrant. So then, as you can see in this last quadrant, just y is negative. And that is it for the unit circle. I hope this helped, and it does become a lot easier to memorize it once you've kind of learned what these numbers actually mean. So it may be hard at first, but it does get better. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.